What are you building with your desire? It's an interesting question because what we've been reading in Exodus regarding the tabernacle, how we can actually channel the desire that we have into creativity and holy purposes. In this show, in Biblical Unlocks, the reason why I made it was so that we were able to defeat lust by reading the Bible. And in this chapter of the Bible, in Exodus chapter 36, we're going to see how we can actually mold and change our desires into holy purposes. And we're going to use the Bible to do that because, as studies routinely show, those who read their Bible regularly have significantly lower symptoms of depression, anxiety, and stress, whilst also significantly higher feelings of forgiveness, compassion, and a sense of purpose. So, if you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. And today we're going to read through Exodus 36, the entire chapter. I'm going to ask you some questions to make sure you're engaged, paying attention, and then afterwards we're going to go through some deep biblical unlocks. So, without further ado, let's read verses 1 to 7. Bezalel and Oholiab and every skilled person to whom the Lord has given skill and understanding to know how to do any work in the construction of the sanctuary shall work in accordance with all that the Lord has commanded. Verse 2. Moses then called Bezalel and Oholiab and every skilled person to whom the Lord had given skill, everyone whose heart was stirred to come to do the work. And they received from Moses all the offerings that the Israelites had brought for the work of constructing the sanctuary. They still kept bringing him free will offerings every morning, so that all the skilled workers who were doing every sort of task on the sanctuary came, each from the task being performed, and said to Moses, "The people are bringing much more than enough for doing the work that the Lord has commanded us to do." So Moses gave command, and word was proclaimed throughout the camp. No man or woman is to make anything else as an offering for the sanctuary. So the people were restrained from bringing, for what they had already brought was more than enough to do all the work. Okay, so here we saw craftsmen, they begin their work, and other skilled workers take the design. And the question here is, do I honor skill and teaching in the church? And who are the craftsmen in my community, right? The next thing we're going to be focusing on is the curtains, cherubim, the linen work, careful, patterned artistry. And do I do the small things with excellence because they are for God? Okay, verse 8 to 19. All those with skill among the workers made the tabernacle with 10 curtains. They were made of fine twisted linen and blue, purple, and crimson yarns, with cherubim skillfully worked into them. The length of each curtain was 28 cubits, and the width of each curtain was 4 cubits. All the curtains were of the same size. He joined 5 curtains together to one another, and the other 5 curtains he joined to one another. He made loops of blue on the edge of the outermost curtain of the first set. Likewise he made them on the edge of the outermost curtain on the second set. He made 50 loops on the one curtain, and he made 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that was in the second set. The loops were opposite one another, and he made 50 clasps of gold, and joined the curtains one to the other with clasps. So the tabernacle was one whole. He also made curtains of goat hair for a tent over the tabernacle. He made 11 curtains. The length of each curtain was 30 cubits, and the width of each curtain was 4 cubits. The 11 curtains were of the same size. He joined 5 curtains by themselves, and 6 curtains by themselves. He made 50 loops on the edge of the outermost curtain of the one set, and 50 loops on the edge of the other connecting curtain. He made 50 clasps of bronze to join the tents together, so that it might be one whole. And he made for the tent a covering of tanned ram skins, and an outer covering of fine leather. Okay, verses 20 to 24 now, we're going to focus on frame, sockets, bars, veil, and entrance screen, which are going to be constructed exactly to pattern. And again, are you being obedient to God's pattern, or tempted to improvise the most sacred things? Verse 20. Then he made the upright frames for the tabernacle of acacia wood. 10 cubits was the length of a frame, and a cubit was a half the width of each frame. Each frame had 2 pegs for fitting together. He did this for all the frames of the tabernacle. The frames of for the tabernacle he made in this way: 20 frames for the south side, and he made 40 bases of silver under the 20 frames, 2 bases under the first frame for its 2 pegs, and 2 bases under the next frame for its 2 pegs. Okay, now verses 25 to 38, we're going to go into a little bit more detail with that obedience theme, right? Am I obedient to God's pattern, or are you going to be tempted to improvise things? So this is going to see us to the end of the chapter. Verse 25. For the second side of the tabernacle, on the north side, he made 20 frames, and there 40 bases of silver, 2 bases under the first frame, and 2 bases under the next frame. For the rear of the tabernacle westward, he made 6 frames. He made 2 frames for the corners of the tabernacle in the rear. They were separate beneath, but joined at the top, at the first ring. He made 2 of them in this way, for the 2 corners. There were 8 frames with their bases of silver, 16 bases under every frame, 2 bases. He made bars of acacia wood, 5 for the frames of one side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the frames of the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 frames for the frames of the tabernacle at the rear westward. He made the middle bar to pass through from end to end, halfway up the frames, and he overlaid the frames with gold, and made rings of gold for them to hold the bars, and overlaid the bars with gold. Verse 35. He made the curtain of blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and fine twisted linen, with cherubim skillfully worked into it. He made for it 4 pillars of acacia, and overlaid them with gold. Their hooks were of gold, and he cast for them 4 bases of silver. He also made a screen for the entrance to the tent, of blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and fine twisted linen, embroidered with needlework, and its 5 pillars with their hooks. He overlaid their capitals and their bases with gold, but their 5 bases were of bronze. Alright, now it's time for some deep biblical unlocks. Verses 1 to 7, the chapter opens with every skilled man and woman coming to work, and they're guided by the pattern and by the Spirit-enabled leadership of Bezalel and Aholiab. I wanted to make this point during the reading of the chapter, but they are not driven or guided by improvisation. Their work is following a divine blueprint. And whilst it may seem a bit tedious to read biblical chapters where we see basically a tutorial to build the tabernacle, it's important that we see that God's plan actually requires the divine vision that he has and the human skills that we use to enact his greater purposes. Even if we don't understand why we're doing this, what is going on, pick up your shovel and start digging, right? Get your tools and start building, because that is what God requires. In verses 8 to 19, we saw curtains and embroidery, right? Each curtain was 28 cubits, and the width of each curtain was 4 cubits. All the curtains were of the same size. He joined the 5 curtains to one another, and the other 5 curtains he joined to one another, etc., etc. So the craftsmen here are weaving the 10 curtains of fine linen. They embroider cherubim. They join them into 2 large panels, and they secure them with gold clasps. The details, right? The counts, the number of loops, the clasps are actually obeyed precisely. In fact, the exact and precise obedience of the rules comes from Exodus chapter 26. God gives the blueprint in Exodus chapter 26, and then in Exodus 36, Israel follows the rules to a T. So this is what we're seeing with the construction of the tabernacle. In verses, so that was in verses 8 to 19. In verses 20 to 24, we saw the tent covering and the outer protection, the fact that we use goat hair to cover, and dyed ram skins, they're put in place, and that's to help make the tent both beautiful inside and also weatherproof on the outside. So you have inner holiness here, which is going to be protected by sensible outer stewardship. That is the durability. That is to say, when you're going through your spiritual life, you need devotion, which is sort of that inner holiness, as well as the practical protection. That is, you need to take care of the temple of the Holy Spirit, which is your body, right? So you need to take care of that as well. And then verses 25 to 38, we saw the boards, sockets, bars, veil, and screen, they're all assembled exactly as shown. The veil is hung, separating the holy place from the most holy place, as we saw before in Exodus 26 to 27. And the entrance screen welcomes, but with form. The order here protects holiness, and the boundaries here do not choke worship. They actually shape it so that God may be rightly encountered. And that is what separates the holy from the most holy place. And this is going to set up what we see in the Gospels when Jesus dies and the veil is torn, right? This veil is torn, allowing everyone to access and enter into God's presence because of the sacrifice that Jesus Christ made on the cross. So I asked you at the beginning of the episode, what are you building with your desire? And this is something which is really important. Is your desire building God's house or a private idol? That is to say, the tabernacle project here channels both desire and creativity into a holy purpose, right? So that is your gifts of your hands, your eyes, your imaginations, all can be directed towards God's dwelling. But those same energies can be used to fuel lust, attention, time, creative imagination, sensory appetite, and can instead be intentionally, all of these energies can be intentionally redirected to build something sacred. The craftsmen discipline their fingers, their eyes, their imaginations to pattern and beauty. So men struggling with sexual desire can learn the discipline of offering their energy to God's household rather than just simply letting desire secretly construct an idol. And this is good because one of the best ways you can overcome lust, sexual temptation, and desire, one is to flee from it, right? And we read that in the Bible, setting up those boundaries, making sure you have those blocking sites and stuff, make sure you have an accountability partner. But more than that, make yourself as busy as possible, because you just don't have time to watch all of those things and do all of those unholy things, right? Because you're constantly finding something else new to do. And if you have too much time on your hands, your brain is going to wander, your hands are going to wander, your fingers are going to wander. Okay, so you need to ask yourself, where do my eyes roam and hands click most often? Are they constructing lust or are they serving good? So it's important to install those filters, get them in. Set device-free blocks. Now, obviously, I know and I understand that these blockers can be bypassed. What it does do is buy you time. It buys you time. And what I want you to do is I want you to replace idle scrolling with 15 minutes of a skill or service. Repair, write, pray, do something with your hands. Make sure you're training your mind, you're training your imagination, you're training your eyes, you're training your hands to actually do something meaningful for God's greater purposes. So channel that creative energy, because I know there are creative impulses that fuels fantasies. So you could use that energy to make a useful contribution to God's house. So you can start with some small creative projects for the church, for a neighbor, fix a bench, design a flyer, cook a meal. Commit the first thoughts of a sexual impulse to prayer and then to the project. And then the next thing is practice public accountability. Like the team, we have a team of craftsmen here. Am I hidden, right? Am I hidden in that struggle, or am I part of a healthy team that watches and supports me? So I want you, choose a trusted brother. I have one which I constantly talk to and discuss these things with. So choose a healthy relationship, a brother, an accountability group, and agree on one-on-one immediate accountability. That is a daily check-in, that is password sharing, weekly honest conversation. There's something called Covenant Eyes as well, you can use that as well. Anyway, defeat lust by feeding the spirit, not the flesh. So that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help you keep up your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. I upload daily, so if you don't want to miss tomorrow's episode, feel free to rate the show and follow. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And always remember, If you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.